Good morning. So Richard Macchiesi is always a hard one to say, but being Italian background, it's often easily identifiable. So as mentioned, my role is basically General Manager of Insights and Innovation at VISY, and I suppose some of the things I'm going to share with you this morning are a little bit about the intersection. I know that a lot of the presentations have a high content of technology and innovation in it themselves, but what I want to try and get through this morning is some of the innovations that obviously VISY is addressing in the marketplace, and particularly related to the agriculture sector in particular. Obviously some of the investments that we're doing that are primarily driven around servicing the customer base in this space. And then I suppose, how packaging and some of the technologies that we gain insights to and trends that are happening around the world, how they intersect some of the development that we have, particularly in my group. So the one thing I suppose that I didn't cover there in terms of what we're going to also present is an exciting new technology that we recently developed and in the throes of starting to roll out to the market. I'll take no credit for the technology myself, and Dr. Peter Bankowski is with me today, who works in my team, and he's somebody who you can definitely ask questions on what this Thermotrack technology is, as a brand name that we've given it. So each year, I've been lucky to do this a couple of years in a row now, and each year what I like to do is look at things that are happening in the marketplace, because all the technology and application that you give to your product to be able to get it to the consumer, the retailer, or at the point of consumption, what you're optimally looking for is the product to be in its best condition. So there's a lot of things that happen in a broader marketplace that dictate the product, how it works through the supply chain, and I suppose for us it's the intersection of packaging and how we can assist in delivering the vehicle of produce to the marketplace. When I was studying my master's, a lecturer said, we did something on packaging, and he said, what is VISY all about? And we all said, well, it's all about packaging. And he said, it's not, it's about mitigating the risk of getting the product from, say, the farm to the retailer, and the amount of risk that we can reduce in that and getting the product in its best condition. So just to give you a little idea of some of the things, and this is about channel more than anything else, and the intersection of packaging here is primarily driven around the performance of the product or the presentation of the product to the consumer. So I think Aussie Farmers Direct is probably the best local example, but a UK-based business, Able & Cole, they've got up to 50,000 people today in terms of customers. They provide a variety of organic type products in terms of fruit and produce to home. Obviously we're all a little bit time poor today. We don't have the time to be able to go and do the fruit and vegetable shopping as we have in the past. So we all like the convenience of it being delivered to the door. So the packaging piece here is often translating something that needs to go through maybe a little bit of a different supply chain in terms of that last leg, whether it's from a DC, the consolidation of the product into a different packaging format, and then obviously the tailoring of those packs. And I'll talk about a technology that we have available that might be a little bit more suitable, because it's all about maximisation of costs through the supply chain and logistics elements, and how you could tailor a box or a solution or a requirement of a consumer specifically to that application. So here it's all about convenience. It's about the health and wellness. I mean, health and wellness is a trend that's been around forever and a day, and it seems just to march on and on and on as we become more aware, but also the food miles element of things. And I think that there's a great opportunity here for a range of growers, and we intersect a lot of different growers from the perspective of our diverse customer base across all geographies in Australia and New Zealand, and then also even into Asia. So we have access to a lot of product, and I've always conceived that VISY might be the facilitator or aggregator of something in terms of a DC to be able to bring product in, split it up on a consumer base. So we're looking at an e-commerce type strategy there, where you might be able to consolidate a new range or a new vehicle for you to be able to get product into the consumer's hands. It's all about selling more high quality premium product in the end, and we're trying to find different ways that we'll be able to facilitate that. Rooting for the little guy, in this case, this is a branding exercise that was conducted in the US. And the thing I like about this one is it gave the mandarin an identity. Now, we all grow products, and I don't know what the identity of a broccoli might be, or the identity of a potato, or the identity of a carrot, but it's about creating an identity around a particular piece of produce and then giving it something that you can talk to the consumers with. And in this case, the consumption of mandarins in the US accelerated phenomenally, just purely based on the branding exercise they did with that product. They then gave it the identity so to be able to easily peel, and you can see there him being able to take his skin off easily. It was around identification for kids, and it all was born out of one of the growers saying, and one of the buyers at a retail level actually saying, "Isn't that a cute little mandarin?" So they took it and embarked on that way. Now, in terms of branding, we've seen that probably through bananas and to a certain extent here locally, but I think there's a unique opportunity here to be able to think. We all go into the depths of producing our product and making sure it's right. What's the last piece of it that we do? Because what's the difference between a piece of fruit or vegetable that sits in the retail outlet or the greengrocer or whoever else it may be, and a product that sits on a retail shelf? For me, really nothing. It's still serving the same purpose. You're feeding, you're utilising it in the kitchen, but being able to give it an identity might be just a different way of thinking about what you actually produce. Now, it might be an industry approach, it might be a sector approach, or it might be something you take on individually yourself. But definitely a trend that we've seen locally. I've thrown in, and as the relevance of the presentation is around innovation in packaging, I've thrown in something that came to me from IDEO, a group in the US that does some quite out there thinking in terms of new innovations and technologies. And really here what we're looking at is something that was driven around, and none of these are commercial by the way, and I'll explain to you in my chopstick example later as to why not. But some of the things here are quite interesting. This is meat packaging. Now, the intersection of a fresh produce and the ability to be able to handle a product safely, for me this captured a nice element in terms of having the gloves inside the pack. So as you unwrap the pack, in quite a basic pack being corrugated outer, it had the gloves in there so that then the contact that you have with the product particularly, is from a food safety perspective and handling perspective, was something quite different. So the integration of other products within the packaging itself to increase the functionality. This one, and VISY is involved in a range of composite material innovation. We look at that from the perspective of what we have from our waste products ourselves, but we also encourage people to think about the waste products that you have, whether it be particularly on the farm, or as a result of packaging, or as a result of wasted packaging, or as a result of recycling at the back end of the process. This one here is about a bacteria-based composite that is actually attracted to light. And in this case, it actually doesn't dip right down. When I first saw this, I looked at the tray and I thought, how do you get that light into that small tray? But in fact, it's actually a bacteria that's attracted to light and grows and then generates, and you can make your own cups. And then from that point onwards, it's an easily disposable process. So thinking about how we do that from the back end. This one I liked only and purely because of the relevance of dispensing of tablets. Dispensing of tablets in a jar is not always the most attractive way, but this is a fantastic way of a presentation. Now, there is packaging that goes around this, but again, it starts to think about there's a certain amount of theatre or there's a certain amount of differentiation, and I know there's variation in size and product, but I suppose in terms of a fruit and vegetable application, how you could actually present your product in a different way. And this is really something which is, say way out there, and we're talking years ahead as opposed to in the next 6 months. But it was something that generated for me, and this is a lot of the activity that my group looks at looking at the stupid in some cases and trying to make it realistic. And I'll talk a bit about that later on. This one was nothing else other than the TDK cassette that we all used to press play when the radio came on and try and get the start of the song. This is nothing about that. So it's basically a cardboard tape. The thing here for me is, and this actually has the ability to have a QR scan code. Now, QR scan codes aren't anything new, but often for me, you look at the opportunity from a packaging perspective and how you could translate that at a retail level. This one actually has the ability through the QR code to access music and delivers it directly to your phone. So you're carrying a tape around, which is a retro piece of let's say, packaging or an item, but it has that ability to be able to translate some form of video. And for me, I think this is an opportunity on pack that we don't often look at, but the level of authenticity and this idea of heritage and trust that is now very prevalent in consumers' mind because of, the computer, the internet itself runs so fast, runs so quickly, we sort of lose that ability to be able to touch things. This brings that back in a subtle format, but able to communicate back to a consumer, maybe look at the farm, have a short video, explanation of the process or the journey of the particular product through the supply chain. And for me, this was the ultimate in premium packaging. This is basically it's a fibre tray. But the idea here is taking a doggy bag to a whole new level, and it's about having the chef put his signature on the product. So you can see underneath that the consumer has obviously finished the meal, but the ability then to buy product post that experience. So the ability to buy product post the experience of consumption at a restaurant, which is a completely different channel to be able to sell fresh produce through. And thinking of new channels, I just got an email actually just before I started my presentation. Woolworths have just launched a retail store at Melbourne Airport. So my research on the way home is to go through this retail store and think of that as a whole different channel. And it's about not having to go home to an empty pantry, which I think is a nice subtlety. And this one, although I'm presenting at the Banana Congress on Saturday as well, was something very nice in terms of how do you actually make packaging translate into the identification cues we have when a produce starts to ripen or get to the end of its shelf life? So the idea here was that packaging, in terms of medicine in this case, actually started to replicate a mature banana so that you would not have to go and look at the dates, because I'm sure we've all got medicine cabinets full of different products that we look at the expiration date when we've got a headache or some ailment that we store that medicine for. But this is a ready visual identification that translates. For me, this is also something that you could translate back in terms of the packaging itself and the produce inside is a communication piece of freshness in the case that it's not there, but also easy identification, say in a store where something might be sitting there for a longer period of time. To go into some more specific packaging innovations that VISY's doing, we're continually, and I'll talk about this in terms of our chairman and his philosophy, but we're continually investing obviously in the local market to be able to strive to be able to deliver better boxes. Now, boxes aren't always that exciting, and it's always a hard one to be able to show you innovation in. But in terms of this is basically a $4 million investment that we've completed locally. This is all about getting a higher quality post-print quality. And I suppose in this sense, this translates to what are you actually seeing when your product sits on a shelf somewhere? What are you seeing when the product actually sits in the presentation vehicle? I know that a lot of retailers are driving us all to go to plastic boxes or plastic crates and things like that, but I know that VISY specifically has fought that battle once before and will fight that battle again from purely a sustainability perspective, and also nothing better than fibre, which is easily recyclable and obviously doesn't require the volume of water. But the R flute itself, and you can see it's basically, if anyone's au fait with the flute technologies, replacing a B flute, it's all about the level of flute, it's about the thinness of the actual board itself, so you'll be able to maximise your pallets. It's about storage efficiency, logistics efficiencies, and for us it's about obviously the precision around cutting, but then also the aesthetics of the product. So sharper edges, nothing worse than seeing your box with rounded edges or sags, and this is about delivering particular strength. So in the case of strength, we then incorporated the R flute with a B flute. Again, this is something relatively new in terms of a bulk cold storage style of product. So again, reducing the sag, improved compression strengths, and obviously in terms of the conversion that we're going through at the moment, this is obviously a rollout process, and we've already converted one site today. From the sustainability perspective, polystyrene replacement, I've often had this battle when I talk about this technology with people who supply polystyrene, but the biggest issue with EPS is the back of store, and retailers will constantly complain the space it takes up, the ability to recycle it, and then I suppose from this perspective you could almost consider it a delivery system. So we've created, under many trials, and it's gone on for a long period of time. It's almost a 2-year journey, as innovation doesn't generally happen overnight. We've had many iterations from a design perspective, but we've also had many iterations of the performance and identifying the performance of the product through the supply chain. So who would have thought that one day you would have a broccoli box, in this case, full of ice, and running that in comparison with a polystyrene box through the supply chain, side by side, and then what we basically did is ran it from Queensland down to Melbourne. And as we got to the store, we identified, and in some cases, and in fact in most cases, the insulation properties of the cardboard and the residual amount of coolness and ice within the product was higher in the cardboard product than it would have been than it was in the polystyrene product. So again, it's a little bit of a breakthrough in terms of performance of the product. Without giving away too much, obviously there's a liner involved, but one of the things that we always maintain in our minds is how do we maintain the recyclability of the product? You can add a certain amount. We've seen wax, although wax boxes have a great calorific value for our cogeneration plants in burning capability, but this one, in terms of recycling and recapturing that fibre and putting it back into the stream, was obviously key for us. So we always take into consideration not only what we're doing up front in terms of the innovation itself, but the impact as Australia's largest recycler of what happens to the back end, and when we start to collect the boxes and put that back through our process. As I talked about before, consumer requirements are becoming very different, and by no means do we want to stop making boxes for the industry, but a great technology that I saw at Pack Expo a couple of years ago, and we've created an alliance with this group, and we call it Boxes on Demand. So basically what it is a machine that would sit on site, or it might sit on our site, or it might sit at a DC or even at one of our Boxes and More sites, where you'd be able to dial up short run. This is about the idea of short run, but it's also about the idea of tailoring boxes to a specific size. So the technology here is about having a barcode scanner, and you basically put what you want within a grid, and you can scan the top, you scan the bottom, scan the side, and then it actually produces a box specifically for that size product, which I think from a premiumisation perspective or delivery perspective, when you look at a lot of that e-commerce, local delivery type piece, it's actually quite attractive because it maximises the ability to be able to tailor a box specifically to the size. You reduce your logistics costs, but then also you're not carrying stock of redundant boxes or filling boxes with void. Now, the other element for this is also moving machinery around. So whether or not you are a machinery supplier, or John Deere or something from a spare parts perspective, being able to consolidate different products, being able to send to you as a grower, spare parts of sorts, that you would be able to have that and a tailored, so it actually reduces the cost of that product getting to you. Unashamedly, always spruik investments that we do in the local market. And recently we completed a recycling plant. It was first of its type in Australia. It has been in the UK and it has been in the US. It's a food grade, FDA approved recycling plant for HDPE and PET. Costing sort of approximately $40 million. It was a significant step and significant investment, but it is actually a duplication and an extension of our model and our commitment to the Australian market to be able to collect what we produce. So as a high volume producer of PET and also HDPE, we found a way to be able to collect that product, turn it back into a similar performing and in some cases exactly performing product, and be able to incorporate back into your packaging. So we've got an approval for 100% inclusion in PET. and soon you'll see some products in the market that will have 100% PET, and I'm guessing if you drank out of your regular soft drink bottle, I won't use brand names, that you may not have realised that there's 15% or so of recycled content in there today. But as consumers, it's something that we readily identify. So from our fibre supply chain, where we've been recycling fibre for a long period of time and turning that into boxes, this is something that we've now done in our plastics piece. In terms of the logo itself there's about 480 different sustainability logos and carbon footprint logos used around the world, so we thought 481 might not be that big an issue. But from VISY's perspective, we're making a significant investment, and this is something that we're hoping to translate across a lot of our packaging, because consumers there's a range of different sustainable style polymers and sustainable style products for packaging, but this is something that's readily identifiable. I know if I throw out my PET bottle or my milk bottle in HDPE, it's coming back to me as a recycled product. It's something that I think is very translatable. Boxes and more. This, from an innovation perspective, has been quite interesting. I don't think there's any sort of magical science in the sense of being able to provide a range of different consumables that you might have when you buy your boxes. But the magic we're in the process of creating here is an application that your salesperson or representative from VISY will be able to automatically calculate the amount of consumables that you require. The benefit here is an app-based piece of technology on your iPad or your iPhone. They'll have readily available for them. Let's say, for example, you buy 1,000 boxes, it tells you how much tape you need, how much strapping you need, and whatever other consumables are related to the box. The idea behind this is being able to reduce your stock holdings. The idea is being able to sell you different products as we stand there delivering your boxes. But I suppose the idea here is that VISY is also looking at alternative e-commerce type applications that complement just the sale of a box. From our laboratory services, and we probably sit uniquely in Australia, as we often get a lot of our customers come to us talking to us about how we could possibly test or validate some of the products and other packaging outside of our own packaging substrates as well. So what we're really looking at here is we're growing a range of different instrumentation, and we're often looking, and I'll talk to you about an interesting piece of instrumentation I found downstairs recently, but we're looking at investing in a new cool room to be able to complement a technology I'll talk to you about, and obviously establishing new partnerships. We've established a new partnership with a group in Israel that is looking at a range of antibacterial type technologies, and that's spraying internally on packaging, so having antibacterial behaviour. And biodegradable nanotechnology. So nanotechnology's been around for a while, and we don't understand the full impacts of it through the supply chain, but also in terms of the biodegradability. So there's some interesting things there in terms of what we're developing. But the main technology, I'll skip through that. There is a main technology I want to talk to you about. Just to touch on that, I don't know if anybody was lucky enough to attend the Global Food Forum that was recently held in Melbourne. One of the things that I got out of this, and I suppose one of the things, interestingly enough, that our chairman Anthony Pratt, who a lot of you would know, he said it's a challenge for Australia to be able to be the food bowl for Asia. And I think from that perspective, there is a great challenge here in Australia that we have this fabulous product, clean green environment that's world recognised, and the ability of the 300 million middle class consumers that are emerging in China and other parts of Asia in terms of what their requirements are. So there were some key messages. I won't go through all of them there in terms of what Anthony talked about. You can easily read those. But it was encouraging more people into agricultural science. It was about alleviating impacts that we have from a political perspective, say, in terms of payroll tax for the food sector. But Anthony unashamedly said that the growth in this sector grows our business, but it grows your business in terms of trying to find vehicles of exporting product into Asia. So as an intersect of that, we came up with something recently, and Peter came and told me with another one of our technologists, I've developed a chicken gun downstairs. Now, I don't know if anyone saw the Mythbusters episode where they were shooting frozen chickens at the airline window. But basically what they developed was that, although it didn't shoot anything, thank God, from an OH&S perspective, was quite interesting. But this has been an amazing journey of technology development that's been driven out of the performance of product through supply chain. So a lot of what we do from a development perspective in terms of our innovation process, we take everything into consideration. And the beauty of what VISY offers is that we offer that real closed loop end-to-end type solution. And in this case, Thermotrack is something about optimising your product through the complete supply chain and all the different intersections of time where it changes hands or changes responsibility, and I mean that from a logistics and retailer type perspective, and then understanding the performance of your product through that. So from a box strength and design perspective is a big issue. Cool room, the amount of variation within cool rooms, the logistics and where it goes, how far it travels, what sort of transport it's at, is delivered on, and then everything through from the palletisation, which has a profound effect on the performance and temperature control of your fruit, as fruit through the supply chain either evolves itself or ripens depending on the particular product or vegetable, and then also comes down to your shelf quality. So the amount of operational variation that occurs, and as we all understand, we have at the back end of our product, and we were talking about the robotics element before and how you could potentially integrate the packaging into that. The amount of packing practices developed depending on the size of your farm, the complexity of your farm, and in the case of what we saw earlier this morning, the technology on your farm. So understanding how that works. I'm sure if we did a survey within here of the growers at cool store variation and the technology you have in your cool store, the age of your cool store, the location of your cool store, and how many times it's handled either within your cool store or prior. And then obviously the downstream handling was all taken into consideration. So what the guys did is they picked a particular segment, and in this case it was a citrus segment, to be able to conduct field trials. And from a VISY perspective, we have designers that have sat with our business for 20 years, and they would unashamedly say, don't come and talk to us about box design, because we intuitively know what it is. But what this technology does, it allows you to look at the box design and its relationship with airflows within the cool room environment and the supply chain. So it's about optimising what occurs through that supply chain, and in this case, offering science to your box design. For me, this was a great breakthrough in the sense that box design is primarily looked at a bunch of holes in a box, or the strength required from a stacking perspective, palletised in an optimised manner, and then shipped. And we don't think much of that afterwards. But the algorithm that Peter has developed, and he said if he had to print the spreadsheet out for that algorithm, it would basically take up the entire size of this room. So we'll leave that for him in his computer. We won't go through that. But what it is basically feeding in is the data and the performance of the product as you travel through. He's developed, and we engaged a industrial design company to assist us with the development. We're in the throes of purchasing some software specifically tailored that'll be proprietary for this. And it also allows the innovation guys to come and visit and understand what is going on from the back end of the farm right through to the consumer, delivering that product in optimal condition. And as a result of that, you think about that balance. So where you try to sometimes, if we had the perfect airflow on a pallet in a cool room and through the supply chain, sometimes to be able to have that balance between optimising the strength of your box and how that works, and obviously the improved cooling rate. So the science that Peter's developed, and Peter will be on the stand for the next couple of days to be able to talk to the ins and outs of it, but he can actually improve your cooling rate by 10 to 20%. Now, does that sound like a lot? It's a big difference in terms of you thinking about either the extension of the shelf life of your product or the performance of your product and how it actually lands in the retailer's hands and the consumer's hands, more importantly. So the typical process that we would go through is obviously developing tailored solutions. And as I said, there's a lot of variation in the different supply chains that we all experience, and obviously the length of the supply chains that we experience. So the offer here is today for our specific innovation group to come and visit, obviously via your VISY rep, to come and scope out what that is. And I think you'd be surprised in terms of some of the technology that we have that actually defines the design. It throws conventional design out the window, which I think is a nice piece, because vent design and the balance between that top load strength and performance of the product is key to understanding. So sometimes you might let go a little bit of strength to be able to optimise the ventilation pattern. And as much as vents can't be put on corners and different things like that, I think that convention is slowly being thrown out the window. But what it is backed up with is science and knowledge to be able to quantify. And the idea of it is that you could do multiple variations of your pallet configuration, your box design, before we even make a box, and via our software be able to understand the performance of that. The other element of it is obviously the benchmarking of your technology or your current box today to the new technology. Thank you.